Hey man, good morning, y'all. My name is Will. I'm one of the pastors here. We're walking through a series called Fruitful, which is a series on vision and generosity and how those two things go together. And I'm excited this morning to begin to share a little bit of kind of the 1.0 version of what we've been hearing from you. Let me say, if you are brand new, if this is your first time at Powell Church this morning, this is a fantastic, we hope every week is a great week to be new, but this is a really great week to be new because what we're getting ready to walk through is a refresher real quick on our core values and our mission statement, and then just kind of the first pieces of what we've been hearing from you about what we envision for this place here in the next season for us. So we've been working with a consultant, Palmer Cantler, has done a great job. We've heard from about 125 different adults. She was with our youth, she was with our recovery leadership, she sat down with our staff, and then a bunch of folks filled out this survey online as well to say, what do you like about this place? What do you like less about this place? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our opportunities? What do we feel threatened by? And then to begin to say, what's next? What do you think is next for Powell Church? What are we seeing? What are we hearing? These kinds of things. And so yesterday we had about 30 of us. It was our staff, our committee leaders, and our small group leaders. We're all together here yesterday working through some of what we've heard from you, as a way of kind of beginning to try to put together some vision language and more than just the vision language, specifically, where do we want to go and what do we want to do next? So let me start with what you already know, or if you're new with us, really what's at the heart for us. These are our core values, and this is our mission statement. Back in the spring, we did a series called What Kind of Church Is This? And we talked about that when it comes to our core values and our mission statement, there's nothing new here. When we met yesterday, we didn't reconsider either of these two things. We didn't say, are we sure we still want to be a come as you are church? We're not sure. I don't know. Maybe we want to be a little more exclusive. Are we sure we is really greater than me? We'd have to reprint t-shirts. I don't know. None of this is up for grabs, right? The core values for us are that Powell Church is a come as you are church, where we is greater than me and Jesus is at the center of everything. That's what kind of church we are. We believe, I've only been the pastor here for 2 years, but we believe this is what kind of church Powell Church has always been. Some form of Powell Methodist Church has been around for 124 years. I don't know that any of us can speak to what it was like in 1880, but many of us can speak to different points along the way for this body in this place. And this, we feel like, captures the spirit of our congregation, that this is a come as you are church where we believe we is greater than me and we seek to put Jesus at the center of everything, because ultimately we believe Jesus is, in fact, at the center of absolutely everything in this world. So those are our core values. Our mission, also unchanged. Our mission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. That's not unique to us. That's also the mission of the United Methodist Church. Even if some of you who were here yesterday, or maybe you've been in a meeting where you tried to come up with a vision statement with 30 people in an hour, and you're like, this might have some bumps. I would submit to you that most churches, even if they're not Methodist, even if some of the words are different, I think most churches get this right, the mission. I think most churches understand and believe that we're not just here to make believers, we're here to make disciples of Jesus Christ, and that we do this not just for our own salvation, but we do it for the transformation of the world. So essentially, as we talked about this back in the spring, that's what kind of church we are, and that's what we believe a church like this is for. But what we've begun to do is to say, hey, we believe that everything in this world, everything God has created is seasonal. And as we're entering into a new season, what do we want to be? Where do we want to go? These kinds of things. One of my favorite things about this place is how weird we are. I was right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Was that Frankie? Frankie will be dressed up as something in the lobby next week. So if you're brand new with us, and this is usually the time of year when someone comes for the very first time and there's a witch in the lobby, I don't know what's going on. We're getting ready to build towards trunk or treat. Come next week to see what Frankie's dressed up as. It'll be amazing. So I was on a podcast this week where they wanted to talk to us about how we are making disciples at this church. And they said, tell us about your church. And the first thing I said is, we're really kind of weird. And then I thought, that's really not what I wanted to say on this podcast about this church. But it's true. And part of the weirdness, if you will, like weird is not in our mission statement, like we're not aspiring for it. But part of what I'm going to continue, I think, to call the weirdness here is, what is the dominant demographic of this church? I don't know. We have a story here where some of you in this room, some of you watching on YouTube or listening on a podcast, some of you were here almost 60 years ago when they built this building over here. Some of you were here 20 years ago when we built this room. Some of you were here 8-10 years ago when this church was worshiping at 800 people. And some of you were here a couple years ago when this church, and really for a season of 4 or 5 years, when this church went through very difficult things. Some of you are new in the last couple years, and you may not know anything about that. Some of you, this may be your very first Sunday here. But there's not like one of those groups that's so much larger than any of the others. So when we tell the story of this place, we all are kind of telling it the only way we can, which is from our own perspective, our own seasons, our own experience, our own ways we've seen God move in our lives, in this church, in this community during the time we've been part of this place. And so it makes for a really weird and kind of interesting mix. As we say, we is greater than me. This is a place where different kinds of people seek to speak the same words of grace and truth in as many different languages as we can. And so I just want to say, however long you've been here, and whatever part of the story of the past this church is or whatever, something we've been talking about for a couple of years is that we believe God is in the renewal business. That God is not, especially coming out of the pandemic a couple of years ago, God is not, we didn't use language like restarting or relaunching. We didn't use the word revival because although that sounds like a church world, I'm pretty sure no one was dead here. We weren't reviving, but we were and are in the midst of renewal because that's what God does. That's what Jesus does in and through us is consistently. We have been made new in Jesus through the Holy Spirit, and we are being renewed day by day. And we are deeply grateful for the renewal we've seen in this place over the last couple of years. And now we want to ask, okay, what's next? Where does this go? And so I want to begin to share just a little bit of that with you this morning. I want to say just real quick, when we heard about strengths and weaknesses, and we went through kind of all this yesterday, I just want to say a word of thanks for all the kind words about our staff and our team here. Everybody here works very hard. And so just deeply grateful and appreciative to hear that being seen and recognized and known and loved. And so we're incredibly grateful for all of that. So if our core mission is, if our core values are, what kind of church is this? And our mission is, what is a church like this for? Vision comes with a more time-based component to say, okay, because we're this kind of church, where are we going next? And so what we did, 30 of us or so yesterday, is we took your language, your feedback, when we asked in listening sessions and online surveys, what do you envision for Powell Church next? We took all that information and we tried to say it in 13 to 16 words. Again, there were 30. Some of you who were here yesterday, you may still be looking at this and be like, I don't like that word, and I wish it was a different word and all that. So this is very 1.0, try not to get hung up on things, but in terms of what we heard from you and how we synthesize that kind of together. When we talk about what's next, the things we heard most often is we want Powell Church to be a place where we're sharing the love of Christ by multiplying faithful disciples as a life-changing community, both locally and beyond. Sharing the love of Christ by multiplying faithful disciples as a life-changing community, both locally and beyond. Let me say a couple things about this. One, you may look at that and say, well, don't we do that already? If so, good, right? Again, our vision is not to say, thankfully, our vision was not to say, we hate this place and it needs to be drastically different than what it is, right? So some of what we're hearing, a lot of what we're hearing, which is how it kind of gets represented this way from you, is essentially we like some of these things that are already taking place and we want to continue to share the love of Christ, multiplying faithful disciples as a life-changing community, both locally and beyond. I want to spend most of our time this morning talking about what we're getting ready to talk about next, which is what are the specific goals, the specific visions, what are the specific ways this looks like for us in the next 3 years. But I just want to say, this becomes kind of a framework for us when we're in a staff meeting, or when we're in a church council meeting, when we're evaluating the things that we do and the things we want to do, for us to say, does it share the love of Christ? Can you go back one? Go back to the vision statement. Thank you, sir. Does it share the love of Christ? Does it make and multiply disciples? Again, in all of our language, we're not just trying to multiply human beings. We're not just trying to grow worship attenders. We're trying to multiply faithful disciples. Does it share the love of Christ? Does it make and multiply disciples? Does it help disciples make other disciples? And does it change lives? We believe, we hope that this is a place that makes a difference in your life and helps you make a difference in someone else's life, both personally and institutionally, all the things Tiana shared about in the opening video, that we seek to be a place that is making a difference, making a change, doing transformation in your life so that we can help do transformation in the lives of other people. And so, again, this is kind of 1.0 language. If you got thoughts about this, come see me. We would love to hear them, love to talk about them, that sort of stuff. But really, we spent time, and I want to spend the bulk of our time this morning talking about specifically how do we want to see this played out for our church in the next 3 years. We talked about vision. Again, this church turns 150 in 2030, but we felt like 6 years is too long. I don't know anyone who has a 6-year plan. If you do, maybe you should have led the meeting yesterday. But we didn't want to say, here's what we want to be in 6 years. We really focused on, here's what we want to do in the next 3 years. And then in 2027, sit down, reevaluate, do some of these things again and say, all right, when we turn 150, how do we want to look? And what do we want to be in those kinds of things? So when we talk about vision, specifically 3 objectives that we want to focus on here in the next 3 years. So taking what we've heard from you, taking vision, when we say, what kind of church do we want to be in the next 3 years? What are 3 things that we really want to focus on? 3 things we really want to focus on are an intentional discipleship path, financial stability, and community engagement. So this, to me, is kind of the heartbeat of a lot of what we've been working through, asking you about those kinds of things is, what do we really want to focus on? What do we envision carrying out as a congregation as a large kind of emphasis here in the next 3 years? One of the most important words on this screen is the word intentional. Because we would say that our faith, our church, our life, we don't want to, we certainly try not to do anything accidentally, and we certainly try not to do things haphazardly, but having this idea of an intentional discipleship path, if discipleship is at the heart of mission, if this idea of helping other people be like Jesus, helping me be like Jesus, how do we do that with as great of an intent as we can? And this looks like for the full spectrum of our church. Something that we heard before I was here, something was heard in a previous consultation with Powell Church back 6 or 8 years ago, was there should be a path for every person from I'm a first-time visitor to I joined a small group. What is the path, not just joining the congregation and all those kinds of things, but what is the path for individuals to work on and walk through their own discipleship with other members of this body? That original consultation, however many years ago it was, is part of the way that Jamie Botnight was brought on this team to do First Impressions, and that what Kelly Acuff does now. And so we greatly appreciate all the good words about our hospitality and about our coffee and about our treats and all that stuff out there. We want to continue to build that path. So it looks a little bit like for new people, how do they get even more connected? How are they not just joining the church, but finding their way, finding their people? But for all of us, how are we connecting to this place, not just here on Sunday mornings, and not even just with mission and service, but intentionally seeking to grow as disciples of Jesus Christ together in this place? And so this is one of our major focuses for the next 3 years in this next season, to say, how can we be even more intentional along this path? Deeply grateful to have an associate pastor of discipleship and outreach who works on that. Tiana works on that as part of her role here. And so that's one big piece of this puzzle. Financial stability was also a big thing that was mentioned as things we want to work on, things we want to improve. Sometimes that sounds like, for us, finish paying off this building, which this building is getting ready to turn 20. It's got about $325,000 left on it. Because it's getting ready to turn 20, many of the air conditioning units in it are celebrating their 20th birthday by dying. And so we are deeply great. Listen, I sweat every week, so don't use me as a judge. But back in January, remember when it was 10 degrees for 10 days? And we weren't in here, and we were like, oh, whatever. And then we came back into the building, or maybe Jim Burgess, wherever Jim may have soldiered in here by himself in the snow and ice. And we were like, oh, okay, that one quit working, and this one's been working overtime and all other stuff. So we're deeply grateful, and some of you helped us come alongside this, deeply grateful to have been able to replace some of that HVAC already and do those kinds of things. We also recognize there are other kinds of things that come with a 20-year-old building and a 60-year-old building and that sort of stuff. So some piece of this is just what comes with being at a building of our size and a church of our age and that sort of thing. But a big part of it for us, or at least a big part of the way I talk about it, is we want to make sure that that things are intentional, like we say. And something we're talking about in our team is we want to make sure we budget and do ministry and all of that for the church we are and the church we want to be, and separate or just remove some ways that we might still be budgeting for the church we were 8 to 10 years ago, if that makes sense. That we want the story we tell in this place to be one of renewal, one of vision, one of forward thinking, and not one that is beholden to the way things were done in the past in a different kind of congregation. So there's lots of small steps that you'll see along the way here. One of the things we heard, and one of the things that we want to do better, is just in how we communicate, what information we make available, those kinds of things. But we want to make sure we're telling the story that we want to tell for the story God is telling in this place today, and the story God is telling into tomorrow. And then finally, community engagement. And let me say, to me, that looks specifically a couple different ways, because, again, as you saw in the video, community engagement isn't up there because we think we're bad at it, right? Community engagement isn't up there because we think we're not asking you to do anything. This church is as missionally minded and connected in these ways as any body I've ever been a part of. But to me, it looks like two things in particular. One, are we enabling ourselves to dream the dreams of today and tomorrow? Here's what community engagement looks like if you missed that video earlier. We have a clothes closet that's here and available for folks to come and get clothes for free. And our clothes closet was doing a big extravaganza at Christmas that was also happening at the same time as like 3 other extravaganzas in this church, right, on the same weekend in Christmas. And we were looking at that. Sherry Circle, who leads the Closed Closet, does a great strategic thinker of saying, maybe we could not do this less, but do it differently and do it better. And so we moved kind of the major Closed Closet emphasis to the start of the school year, away from Christmas, to help free up some of our other Christmas opportunities to have more room to breathe and grow and all that good stuff. And we had what we felt like was an ambitious ask, which was, we want new shoes for Powell Elementary School students who need shoes. Not used shoes, but new shoes. And we want to create the opportunity for choice, so that when a kid comes here in what can be an embarrassing situation to say, hey, I need shoes, I need help, that sort of stuff, that they're not just given here's the free shoes, but that they get choice, they get to pick. We asked for this. We had great teams that worked with Shoe Carnival and GB Shoes, affectionately referred to as Great Big Shoes in my household, to say, will you give us discounts, will you help us? We didn't really set a number internally, but here's how many shoes I thought we would take in, and here's how many shoes we took in. It's this amazing thing. So we took in 110 pair of new shoes that created the opportunity for choice for about 3 dozen Powell Elementary School households. And then we had whatever 110 minus 36 is. We had that many shoes left, right? And we could have said to ourselves, we're good. We got shoes for next year, right? As we shared a couple of weeks ago, when a farmer is given an abundant harvest, and he says, I don't know what to do here. And he says, I know what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build bigger barns. And God comes in and says, nope, bigger barns is not the way. Again, we're pro barns. It's part of our financial stability. But instead, what we did is said, who else can we engage with? Many households in this church go to Powell Elementary. Many households in this church also go to Bricky. And so we reached out. Courtney Lancaster helped us make this connection where we reached out, and something like 27 students and families at Bricky are now able to be part of this and get new shoes with choice. Then we reached out to Norwood Elementary. Like, community engagement is saying, here are the dreams we have. And let's start assuming, probably starting with the lead pastor, let's start assuming that God's dreams might go like this and less like this, right? Community engagement looks like helping us dream the right kind of dreams for today and tomorrow, but also helping us build better partnerships, more partnerships. Because when we talk about we is greater than me, what does Tiana always say? That's not just Powell Church. We is greater partnerships, better partnerships with the other churches in this community who, there are so many people gathered this morning on a Sunday morning to worship Jesus Christ in East Tennessee. And we believe we're not in competition with each other. We're here to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. They might say that a little differently than we would say it, and they would say it, and they would say it. But that transformation of the world happens best when churches work together. See, here's the trick, right? I'm like, yes, that's good. That got an amen. But then we have to actually do it, right? We can't look down the road and be like, those jerks, they won't work with us. Because we didn't ask them to, right? So, when we say community engagement, we're well aware we got that going already. Some of it is making sure, tied into the financial stability, and really just deeply tied into the word intentional, tied into this idea that we do the things we do on purpose, but also that we are building partnerships in this community. Because even if, look, we cannot grow this church so big to meet every problem in Knoxville, period. We can't grow this church so big to meet every problem in Powell. And Jesus says, the poor you'll always have with you. But there is this idea that, again, as we, and just let me say this real quick about growth. We're deeply grateful for the growth we've seen in attendance and all that stuff. We don't just anticipate that continuing to happen, we plan for it. But Growth of human beings is not the goal. It's not the mission statement. It's not the vision statement. The growth, the multiplying is not in human beings or average worship attendance, even though we plan for it and all that good stuff. The growth is in disciples. Are we making more disciples who are making more disciples? Are we helping everyone get connected to an intentional discipleship path? Are we doing that faithfully, financially, good stewards, all that good stuff? And are we a part of community engagement, working together to help build the kingdom? Ours is a God who does things on purpose and invites us to do the same. One example of that in Scripture, and then we'll close our time with a song. In Leviticus, which is my favorite thing to say on a Sunday morning, when we talk about giving, which we've been talking about in this series, next week we're going to share really specifically, really intentionally about when we ask, here's what we're asking for. When we ask, why do you give to a local church? Here's what we're asking for. We're going to talk about what we say about tithing and what we don't say about tithing and all kinds of good stuff like that. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to invite you to bring one of these forward and tell us how we can pray for you and make a commitment to this church. We'll talk much more about that next week. But in Leviticus, when we talk about kind of foundational ideas of giving and doing things on purpose, this is the first fruits language in Leviticus 23. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites, say to them, when you enter the land I'm going to give you, and when you reap the harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of the first grain or the first fruit that you harvest. The priest will wave the sheaf before the Lord, so it will be accepted on your behalf. The priest will wave it on the day after the Sabbath. On the day you wave the sheaf, sacrifice as a burnt offering to the Lord a lamb a year old without defect, together with its grain offering, 2/10 of an ephah of the finest flour mixed with olive oil, a food offering presented to the Lord, a pleasing aroma, a drink offering, 1/4 of a hin of wine." It's about 7 pounds of flour and about 1 liter of wine. You must not eat any bread or roasted new grain until the very day you bring this offering to your God. This is to be a lasting ordinance for generations to come wherever you live. So even going all the way back, what God is trying to teach us, what God's trying to teach me, is we do things with purpose. There is reason, there is intent behind the things that we do. And we do things, when it comes to generosity, first, that things come from the first fruit of what we have. And that this kind of sets the precedent for the whole people of God going forward. There's an old hymn called "Bringing in the Sheaves." Anybody know "Bringing in the Sheaves"? Yes, yes. When I was a kid, my son is named, let me try not to tell a 15-minute version of this story. If my wife was here, she would be like, you need to tell the 2-minute version of this story. My son's named Covington because of Covington, Tennessee. My grandparents had a 200-acre farm there when I was a kid. And my grandfather used to sing "Bringing in the Sheaves." And I was a city kid from Knoxville, and I didn't know what a sheaf was. Just seemed like a made-up word to me for years and years. And my grandparents didn't go to church because my grandmother got mad at somebody one time, and she did what human beings did, which is never went back to church again for the rest of her life. That's a separate sermon. They'd put her on the shut-ins list on the back of the bulletin and still mail her the bulletin. And my grandfather would walk to the mailbox and get the newsletter out at the mailbox. You know, it's a farm. He had like a 4/10 of a mile walk to the mailbox. He'd pull the newsletter out and see her name and pull out his cell phone, his flip phone, and call the church and say, "Please don't put my wife as a shut-in. It's just making her furious, and then I have to deal with it. Please take us off the list." And that well-intentioned church said, "But we want to pray for you." And he was like, "You're not helping me at all." But he used to sing that song all the time. And I just thought it was a made-up song. He was a funny guy. I thought he was making it up. And the first churches I ever served, which was a big agricultural community, which when I said to them, "I don't even know what a sheaf is," they took that much more personally than you're taking it now. But before that, it was the kind of church where at the end of the day, I would say, "What are we going to sing for the closing hymn?" And this woman said, We're going to sing Bringing in the Sheaves. And I said, are you serious? That's a real song? And so there's this idea that we bring to God these larger truths of ourself and our week and all that other stuff. But we are invited to do so on purpose. We just did all this. I know I've set you up. I've set the band up incredibly poorly. We're not getting ready to sing it here because we just did visioning yesterday afternoon, and I didn't even know I was going to talk about this until last night. So stay tuned. I bet we can sing it later. But God invites us to do everything on purpose. And we give thanks for the things that happen here that we don't even know about, or the times we dream this big and it ends up being this big and all that stuff. But I promise you, God invites us to do things on purpose. And we want to do more and more with intent, with good stewardship, with all that kind of stuff. In your own life, how much of your faith is on purpose? How much of our lives, how much of what we do has purpose and intent behind it? We want to be a place where we seek to do that more and more together in this space. And we bring that, even if our purpose looks small and fragile and all of that, we seek to bring that worship, bring all of that together ourselves when we gather in this place. We are deeply grateful from what we've heard from you and what God is doing in this place. And we are very excited about what God is inviting us to do next.